All right, we're back, and pretty much what I did was I just completed a drawing tip of the week, and in that drawing tip of the week I mentioned that you need to block in this tone of this kind of middle tone of the shadow before you can come on in and before you can do this little detail. I think if you start doing the little detail of the blades of grass first, you're pretty much going to drive yourself a little batty, and you are creating the illusion of a million blades of grass by scribbling, and then in choice locations, that's where you're going to come on in and you're going to do like maybe some weeds that are growing up. You're going to do some like little leaves that are here, and I'm going to get there, but what I wanted to show you in this section of the tutorial is, yeah, totally, that's what I did when I was off camera. I basically blocked all this in, and I started doing 1 or 2 little ounces of like detail. I also talked about in that drawing tip of the week the need to put your items that are in the background / midground first. Put them in. You can see I'm putting in these tree trunks, and I'm trying to keep them a little bit more silhouetted, and I'm really focusing in on the edge of them, trying to make the edge very complicated, very interesting as best as I can. And I'm doing that throughout this section. I'm kind of micromanaging this little section. And then after you do that, then you put in the posts and rails of the fence on top of those trees. Again, if you try to go on in there and you try to draw all that like little negative space, you're going to kind of drive yourself a little batty. You've got to do it in layers. And so over here, I'm really just focusing on the back layer first. And you can take it to the next level if you wanted to. And I could have first done the rolling hills that I have here in the background. Now, I started with the cast shadow being cast by these trees, and there's actually some cast shadow on the ground. I want to keep this light, and I want to cheat a little bit. I want to use my artistic license because I want you to go into the far off midground that kind of pulls us around and into, you know, the valley, whatever is back there. So pretty much I'm doing the layers now. I'm trying to keep this semi-flat. The thing with a lot of people with, and I'm going to teach at the Met again on, I think it's October 1st I start, next Thursday. And I really get inspired when I go to the Met because there's some beautiful landscape paintings there. And you look at how they're doing the section that I'm doing right now. These distant, far off rolling hills, or it could be a hill with a lot of trees on it. But basically what you've got to do is you got to not put tons and tons and tons of detail on these far off distant trees, because if you do, hill trees, hilltops, rolling hills with trees on them, however you want to phrase it, if you put too much detail over here, basically your drawing just goes completely flat. You can't have tons of detail in the background along with tons of detail in the foreground. So pretty much that's what I'm doing right now. And if you wanted to, I could have started the drawing, if I wasn't doing this as a video tutorial, I could have started the drawing with these distant hills and just did this after that, but I started the drawing from left to right for smudging, anti-smudging purposes, and now I'm getting into, again, I'm using this like little piece of paper here, this piece of copy paper. That's how I'm preventing my hand over here from smudging. So if I zoom in ever so slightly, and this is where I'm just very softly doing this distant hill. And this distant hill should be a little bit lighter. Right now this is too much of the similar value. I can always come back in here later, tap with my kneaded eraser, but this has got to be very light. And I am going to do some work with my kneaded eraser because I've already gone too dark with it. And here's another layer of foliage that I can put. So these layers, as they go into the background, remember the whole deal with atmosphere. Atmosphere is created by two things, particles of dust or particles of moisture. So on a dry day, it's particles of dust. The sun hits those particles of dust, and they just keep screening out the background items, and the background items get more and more and more diffused. And on like a warm, humid summer day, it's pretty much particles of moisture, And when the sun hits those particles of moisture, that's what gives everything the look and feel of blue and cool blue grays, blue greens in the background, distant trees. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish over here. I'm trying to get these rolling hills to get lighter and lighter because particles of dust, particles of moisture are making them lighter. Now when you look at the photo, I just pointed up to the photo but you can't see the photo. When you look at this particular photo below the tutorial, the distant trees, the distant stuff in the background does not look like particles of moisture, particles of dust. It was a very clear day when I shot this photo, and it was right in the middle of the day. So the middle of the day, you don't really get that late afternoon humidity that you get in the summer, especially here in the eastern part of the U.S. But you have to use your artistic license because the camera does not pick all this stuff up. The camera only sees with one eye. You're a human being, you see with two eyes. So two eyes pick up more interesting visual information than just one camera lens. So this is where you don't copy exactly what you see. You use your artistic license and you manipulate and you add in all these very cool items like atmospheric conditions that when things go into the background they get lighter. Okay, now sometimes you've got to give yourself like this leap of faith that right now I'm working on all this soft stuff and it doesn't necessarily look great until I do, the rails of the fence on top of it. Then it all just kind of goes back into the atmosphere and you're like, wow, that actually looks pretty cool. It's very soft and there's lots of layers back there, and that's when things really start to happen. But just be patient with yourself. At this stage of the drawing that you're working on, when you're working on the background elements, because you got to just understand what the big picture is, and the big picture is that you're going to be plowing in all these rails and fence posts on top of that. It's going to look really beautiful. So at this point in the drawing, I did a little bit over there, and I've got to really pay attention to how things look in terms of like the contour and all that. And so I'll move around. I'll do some stuff here to make sure I stay on camera. I'll do some stuff in the foreground. I don't want to get tunnel vision, even though I did, compartmentalize this drawing, and I did just work in this vicinity over the last, 20 minutes. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just block in more of the grass, and I'm going to do the zigzag thing, and I'm going to layer all the blades of grass in like different pencil strokes as if they're a little bit taller. The lawn or the grass has not been cut, and so the grass gets heavy and gravity kind of pulls it down towards the ground, and so you've got all these blades of grass that eventually lay flat like that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now off camera, in the light and in the shadow, still keeping my lights light and my darks dark.